Welcome back, everybody. And as promised, I have my the NARPM legal savant, Monica Gilroy. Monica, so thank you so much for joining us. So first, just tell us quickly a little bit about you. I gave a bio, but tell us just a little bit about what you're doing right now, and then how your relationship with NARPM is as well. Because I know you're
Absolutely.
you have a partnership with NARPM, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And listen, thank you, Pete. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, talk to all of my NARPM friends who truly we all know are like one big family. Yeah, as you read, I'm an attorney here in Atlanta. My practice, however, is national. I've represented property management companies of all sizes across the country for many years. But again, I'm a trial attorney by nature, Pete. So, I'm the one you call when there's a problem. There used to be a joke, you didn't want to know me, but the idea with NARPM is that it's good to know me because I'm here to help you in your business to make it better, to troubleshoot, to prevent problems. In any event, something bad does happen, you're hit with a fair housing complaint or litigation, I'm here to help you in that regard as well. I am very honored to be the general counsel for the Atlanta NARPM chapter, as well as work as well on the national level with NARPM providing legal advice.
And we're very lucky to have someone like you on our team. There's so many resident groups out there, but there's not a lot of property management advocates out there. So it's nice to have an advocate like yourself on the team.
I appreciate it. I love the industry.
Let's talk about the 3 hot legal challenges out there. So we were talking in the green room, and I said, hey, what are the 3 biggest challenges that you see all the time? So let's kind of go through them. So you hit on fair housing. So let's talk about fair housing first, right? So fair housing, we're all scared of this big, bad, ugly animal called fair housing. So what are you seeing out there? How do we prevent it? What are some of the best practices?
Absolutely. And yes, fair housing is still really the number 1 area where property managers need to look out. It's really not a matter of if, it's usually just when, right? The Department of Housing and Urban Development is still very, very active, right? Sometimes people will say to me, oh, when we have different administrations, does it make a difference? Not really. They're always busy. What changes is just what their focus, what's important to them. As we know in our industry, still one of the number 1 or the number 1 type of claim folks will get is involving disability as it relates to emotional support animals or service animals. And I often, when I speak, refer everyone to that very wonderful directive that was released by HUD back now about maybe 3 years ago that really laid out almost in the form, Pete, of like a find your own adventure. How do you know what to do when someone says, hey, I have an emotional support animal or I have a service animal, and you're able to walk through the steps to determine what do you do. One of the biggest things I think, Pete, is that you've got to be sure to prevent fair housing that every single person in your organization, all the way down to your virtual assistants if you have them, or even the people that are answering the phone if that's a virtual person, even if it's your kid on summer break, they need to understand if they ask a question and somewhere in the notes it says no pets allowed, how to handle someone who says, well, I don't have a pet, I have an emotional support animal or a service animal. That's probably the number 1 thing I think we need to do. Sorry.
We lost you there. Yeah, for a second. So
how far did I get?
We got to emotional support animal. So even if your kid's coming from school.
Okay. So we'll just do it 3, 2, 1. So if there is anyone working in your office who's answering the phone, they need to know what to do if someone says, in a house or in a residence where it might be listed by the owners, no pets, how to respond to that if someone says, oh, I don't have a pet, I have an emotional support animal or a service animal. So training is a big part of preventing those fair housing claims.
So just a shameless plug here, VPM Solutions just put out a fair housing course for your virtual assistants or for anybody that is part of your company that can take at least some fair housing coursework. Now, with fair housing, one of the challenges that I've seen is like the local housing like has one rule, but then federal has another rule. Which one do we go by? What
Yeah,
would you tell us?
that's a great question. You have to abide by both, but in the states that, like
What
especially
if
the West
they're
Coast
like
states,
literally talking about doing the exact opposite?
I was just going to say that, and that becomes a real challenge, right? There's areas on the West Coast, right, that you're like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? You know, we see this a lot when it comes to additional protected classes, right? In some areas of the country, it's considered source of income, which in essence means you can't discriminate against someone who has a veteran status if their funds are coming from the VA. I was teaching a class once, and someone raised their hand and they said, wait a minute, why is someone intentionally discriminating against a veteran? And that's sort of, I don't think people are, but that's the concern that's out there. I think, though, to your question, you've got to be sure that your policies are dealing with both and can address both, right? On the national level, when we really look at what are the biggest areas, again, it goes back to disability, and then it goes into familial status, right? Which is that idea of what is a family, right? What is a family to me is not the same as a family to you, and the fair housing laws make that very clear. Now, we often see that bump up, like you said, with the local rules, not even necessarily from the local or the statewide or the local fair housing offices. We even see this sometimes in the city ordinances, like how many people can be in a house, right? The best advice I can give is you just need to always ensure you're compliant first and foremost with your state or local municipality. Then you have to be sure you have that eye on the federal level as well. Most states or cities that have their own fair housing departments, which is very common on the West Coast, very common in parts of New Jersey, New York, not really up the whole eastern seaboard, but in those Philadelphia, Philly, Pennsylvania, you want to be sure you are, though, in those areas, really cognizant of what those local rules are, because those are going to be the frontline people. They're going to be much more interested in seeing the implementation and enforcement of those local rules secondarily to the federal rules. But you're right, it's a real challenge, which is why that's great. There's a class. We can never get enough training on this topic because it's ever changing, and we can really learn best from looking at the other people who have gotten into trouble. I've told people, if you ever want to fall asleep at night, maybe give yourself nightmares, go to the HUD enforcement site on fair housing, and it tells you all the recent things that people have gotten in trouble for, to see if you're doing any of those yourself. And obviously, if you are, don't. But you know, it's really important to just stay constantly abreast of the ever-changing fair housing environment. It's really the number one thing you can do to avoid liability.
So I'll just kind of summarize. First thing is try to if the city versus federal or city versus state are telling you two different things, go to the lowest common denominator, basically the city, and make sure that you follow those rules. They trump federal in most
cases. I wouldn't say, they don't necessarily trump, but I think you'll have the first person you're going to be answering to will be your local or state person, right? They're in theory supposed to be dealing under that federal umbrella, but there are many states where we're going to have listeners where they don't have, like in Georgia, we don't have that Equal Opportunity Commission anymore, that Fair Housing Commission we used to have. So everything, for example, in Georgia is straight from the feds, right? But yes, you're right. Start with your municipality and then just work your way up from there.
So start with the municipality. Second is get as much training as possible and train everybody in the organization, right? Even your remote team members, which a lot of people forget about because most of the time, those are the ones answering the phones.
Correct.
And then you kind of hit it. ESA is a big one. And I know I beat that one to death. I've had pet screening on here a couple of times. What is and so then you hit another one. So ESA and animals is probably number one. And then number two would be familial status in your
I think when you look at the type of claims that are out there, I mean, disability by a mile, right? All involving the pets. And you're right.
And that's been like that for like 20 years now, right?
Oh my gosh. The pet thing, if you all know by now, if you haven't seen my slide by now that says that you're not a pet, right? An emotional support animal is not a pet. You need to pan that out. But the second, the 2 and 3 sometimes varies, but 2 of recent, I would say the last decade, has been familial status, right? Where, of course, I have the infamous case here in Atlanta where someone listed the condo as no children under 18. And obviously you cannot do that unless you're in like a, specifically
55 and older type.
right, documented 55 or older. And that case was a real bad one. I mean, a lot of monetary fines, Channel 2 chasing people down their driveways. You don't want Channel 2 chasing you down your driveway. You don't want to be there. But it's the concept of turning people away because maybe their family isn't exactly what, and it's really not usually the property manager, it's the owner, right? Mm-hmm. And this comes in a lot when the owner may say, I don't want any gay couples. I don't want any lesbian couples. I don't want any transgender couples. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that, as we know, under both now the federal law, but also under our NARPM Code of Ethics. But that's, again, where that definition of family, you'd get hit if you denied it, two dads and their daughter, even if it's because the owner is because they don't want to have a gay couple there, that's still familial status. And that,
right. So you would say that the majority of this is when we're leasing properties is the majority of the times where we can get hit with fair housing. That doesn't mean it's the only place. So
that's right.
Making sure that you advertise correctly within the guidelines, you answer the phone within the guidelines, and that you have a policy and a process that you do all the time, no matter who's calling or who's reaching out, is going to help prevent any claims against you.
That's right. And I think what you just said a minute ago is the third topic. And the third topic that we see of violations goes in between sex, meaning gender, and race. And that oftentimes can come up during the tenancy, right? Now, yes, the majority of fair housing claims are at the time of application, but there has been a vast number of claims that have come up because of how someone is treated by property management staff. This is very true if you have an in-house maintenance company. There's been a number of claims made by women who believe they are being sexually harassed by members of the property management organization. Same with race, where we've seen individuals claim that, repairs or maintenance is being done slower because of their race. And so you do still see those two kind of neck and neck as number three, but those are things that can come up during the middle of it. So it's just so important to constantly be always, especially as an owner, on top of what's happening in your company, and also being sure internally that you have an escalation process when complaints start coming in. Probably that, that and training with fair housing, knowing when to escalate when one of your people have this problem are really probably two of the biggest ways you can prevent it from getting out of hand.
So another takeaway that I had is, you kind of hit on this. Do not let the owners make the choice, right? So for those of you who say, well, the owner can make the choice, I've always said our job is to have qualifications around what we will and will not take, and they have to be kind of, based on federal fair housing, and then we make the decision based on our guidelines, because we are still we still have our fiduciary responsibility to the owner, because they're based within the guidelines of the property.
Yeah, I mean, two big takeaways there. Obviously, everyone knows I'm a huge proponent of property managers being in charge of everything, because you're the professional. If we're ever in court at the end of the day, which hopefully we aren't, yes, I'm going to take good care of you, but judges routinely will look down, not at the owner, but at the property manager and say, ma'am, sir, you're the professional in the room. You were there to give guidance. And then secondarily, just that idea of, yes, being sure that any of your guidelines, whether it relates to onboarding or how you address maintenance calls, is absolutely neutral, right? Again, we usually use the example of onboarding as your criteria should be based on things that are facially neutral. Numbers don't lie, right? Look at their credit score. Look if they have a history of eviction.
Look at how much they make.
Look at how much they make, right? Things that basically won't matter what the color of their skin is, their gender, their national origin, none of the defining factors, none of that comes into any of that. I'll put a little side note onto that and say, but for that very hurt your brain concept of disparate impact that we've talked about since COVID, that's probably another topic for another day. We won't go too deep there, but based overall, right? The more neutral you are looking at your qualifications and in your policies will prevent you from losing in a fair housing case. Because Pete, the reality is we're still in America. and we're going to talk in a minute about people suing, even if it's wrong, but we have the right to sue, meaning we have the right to defend. So, you can't, you got to be able to assume that you can always prevent your fair housing, but also if you get one, how can you defend it? And your best line of defense is always going to be showing, look, here's how I always do it. This individual who's claiming this problem wasn't treated any differently.
The policy and the process.
You got it.
And one of the things, I've been sued a handful of times when I own my property management firm. And the interesting thing is, when you try to do something nice for somebody, like no good deed goes unpunished.
Always.
And I've always been sued by the resident first. And then when I'm fighting it, the damn owner joins in and he ends up suing me on the other side. So you have to be careful. And that's why you don't want to have your owners your owner clients strong arming you and telling you how to run your business. This is why we're at NARPM, we're so adamant about you run your business. And if an owner's pushing you to do something that is not correct, you need to get rid of that owner. All right. So we'll talk about kind of the process, what you should have after we hit kind of the other two. So the next hot legal challenge, let's talk about squatters. A lot of people are doing these self-showings. I actually have a lot of people now saying they will not do self-showings because of squatters. So tell us a little bit about what these people actually have rights. Like, break this down for me, because
it is probably the number one topic of the summer, right? And even going into the spring, and we're seeing it all across the country, even in states where you wouldn't think that it normally would happen. So this is not happening in your backyard. You are not alone. The concept of someone being called a squatter, right? In every state, there isn't really any such thing as a squatter. We use that term sort of loosely to describe somebody who has, come into a piece of property and just sits there, right? But the real term for them is a trespasser, right? In virtually every state across our NARPM platform, right? They are trespassing. The current scheme that's occurring across the country is pretty similar. It's one of two ways they're getting into the property. One, you're right, is through the self-showing. The second way is even more nefarious. They're literally seeing Mr. Property Manager list 123 Main Street for rent. We're catching them on ring cameras going in the middle of the night, breaking through back doors, getting in, and then early in the morning doing whatever. It's usually two parties involved. There's usually the person who has broken in and then the person that they con into going into the property. Sometimes it's the same person, but usually, because it makes it harder to deal with the authorities, it's the bad guy breaks through the back door, comes in, then meets, Miss Sue on the street the next morning and leases her the property for a cash payment. They then disappear. You're then faced with how do you get Miss Sue out of the property? And that's where across the country, we're seeing different tips and tricks and some, frankly, complete failures of our system to not help us get people out as fast as they could.
Yeah, I know in 2020, one of the big things that we started doing was watermarking all of the photos, because scammers were taking photos from the property management company, putting them on Craigslist, leasing it, for $1,000 less than what the market, and people fall for this all the time. And, I've seen, like, we've literally had moving trucks coming in while we're leasing the property. Like, what are you doing here? Like, oh, we leased the property. Like, no, I'm sorry, ma'am, you got scammed. And I feel bad for those folks, but
absolutely. Yeah. No, and that's sort of the problem, is that, we've had to almost resort of recent to almost like homegrown efforts, right? I spent some time a couple weeks ago with some clients, and they were talking about just little things they're doing, like getting laminated signs, almost like you'd see in a hotel, that they're putting in the kitchen that basically say, this property is managed by ABC Property Management. You should only be getting communications from this person, at this email, this phone number. If you are not, call us immediately, right? The ring camera was another client I had who went through a series of these, to the point where the fastest thing that he was doing was having those ring cameras placed so that literally when they heard the chime go off, right, at 2 a.m, they were able to either get down them themselves or get the police there fast enough the police could see that it's actually a trespasser. The problem we're facing, though, across the country is twofold. One, police, sheriffs, municipality officers are coming in and misunderstanding the situation, and will say oftentimes, this is a civil matter. It's not, friends, a civil matter, right? This is not a tenant who has a potential right to be there fighting with their landlord. This is someone who is a stranger to this property, a trespasser who has come in. I don't care that this third-party victim, right, is the person that's there. They're still a trespasser. Our municipalities, our police, our sheriffs, they're not learned enough about our industry. I mean, let's face it. That's probably the number one challenge we face as an industry is people just, it's so finite in what it's, and it's so unique. People don't understand it. So I've been seeing across the country efforts to try to educate the city council, the police force, anything to try to get them to understand, look, please help us. This is, Mr. Owner, this is his property being, basically just criminalized by this individual. You have to help us out. We couple that with across the nation, just the incredible delays and backlogs we're seeing across all the eviction courts. Because oftentimes folks are being forced to file evictions to get them out. Be sure as a tip, obviously consulting with your local attorney, but or your local eviction counsel, to ensure you're including not just the name of a person who might be there, but if you say John Doe, be sure you say something like and all other occupants and residents, because you want to get to court and be able to be like, I have no idea who that lady is, but I know she's in there. You don't want that to stop you at the end of the day. The other self-help thing a lot of people are doing is looking at their criminal trespass statute. Here in Georgia, we have a statute that we're trying to beef up a little bit to see if that will help us. But at the end of the day, you are very much at the mercy of whoever responds to that call. And that's why these self-help things like the cameras, the notices, I've had some people go in with cash for keys offers immediately to these people and just say, look, I'll give you $1,000 to get out. You actually may spend less money at the end of the day. The last thing I'll say, and then we can keep going, is it's really important to always remember when you're talking to the police or talking to your local officials to remind them that this isn't in the interest of you, the PM. This is your owner, right? Our owners are our true victims here. How many owners do all of our people listening here have who might be retirees? People where this is all of their income tied up in these houses. People who are having to pay mortgages while their property is not being rented for the amounts that they have. Those are the true victims. Those are the people who are not being protected ultimately when these squatters come in. And that's the message we always have to get across. Not like, oh, it's me and I need my money. No, our owners who we represent, they're the ones being truly harmed by these criminal activities.
I would say one thing too is here in Houston, in Texas, we have constables, and I get to know your constables.
Great. Yes, absolutely.
Get to know them because they will do a drive-by and you can educate them and, talk to them and give them real estate advice, whatever you got to do to get,
that is perfect advice. And, and I say all the time, like when we go to Washington to advocate, we have to be the voice for our industry. And so, you've got to get it out there and explain. Again, look to your local laws, but just these self-help things that people can do to help prevent it. I do know I have had a number of conversations with the self-showing folks. They are very concerned about this. They too are taking great strides to be sure that they are not, that they are helping everyone in this industry to prevent that, because we know that there's a lot of good that can come from that. It's just that when we factor in these bad players, it's very frustrating because it's just, we have so much already that we face every day. We don't need these jokesters too.
You gave me a good idea to get a couple of those guys on the NARPM podcast and talk about this more.
Yeah, I've had numerous conversations. They're very committed to this because they know that, and they know that technology constantly changes, right? I mean, like you said, the watermarking back a few years ago, everything is so sophisticated with how people, can scam their way into properties.
Yeah. So just to kind of put a bow on this, they're not squatters, they're trespassers. It's not a civil matter. It is a criminal matter. Try to do what you can to prevent people from squatting or trespassing in your place, which is a ring camera, notifications everywhere, watermarking, things of that nature, and then get to know your constable and try to educate your constables that you're not a big corporation here. It's somebody's, it could be somebody's, full investment. And so
exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so should we have What's the first thing we should do when we see that though? Like contact the constable, and then like, do we have to get an attorney involved at that point, or is it
No,
just
no. This is where the power of your citizenship. The first call is to the policing authority, your constable, your city police, your sheriff, because even if they come out there, right, and they for some reason let the trespasser stay, right, you have major police report. This is also important for your owner, because what if that individual, that trespasser, while they're in there, destroys the
damages?
interior?
Yeah,
Yeah, damages
happens
it.
all the time.
That's right. And that is a real covered event under homeowners insurance, right? When someone comes in and vandalizes your home. And so that might be the saving grace for like your investor owner, some little individual person, where even if they can't get rent for that period of time, they may be able to file a claim for
Is that under
trespassing.
vandalism? Would that be
Yep, it's
vandalism?
like vandalism, exactly. Because
So,
it's no different than if I broke into your house and started, doing things and then left with your oven. I mean, it's no different than that. But yes, your first call should always be to the authorities. And obviously, I urge caution with safety first. You have to assume that these people could be dangerous, could be armed. That's why it is always appropriate to go to the police first and at least have that initial knock on the door, be with a safety officer to be sure that your safety and that of your staff is not compromised. One more little tip on that. I had a client who was sending out just junior people. This is not where you send out junior people. This is where you go, your senior people go, or you even bring with you somebody who would be protective if there was a situation. Safety always first with yourself and your staff.
okay. So I call the police. On the insurance thing, you make sure that your investors have the right insurance, because a lot of these folks will live in the house and they move out and they don't change their insurance from their regular homeowner insurance to the to the investor home insurance. And then
Yes.
typically vandalism is typically an extra rider. And so they should have that, because I got caught up on that one. I didn't have the vandalism and it cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. So just a couple of tips there when you're talking to your owner clients.
Yeah, that's a great advice.
So the last one is near and dear to my heart, and I made you talk about this one. I know mold is not everywhere in the country, so if you're like in Minnesota or Alaska, you probably don't have much mold. Here in Houston, it grows everywhere, and I personally, I'm an open book. Empire was sued, I think, 3 times for mold. All right, so this is near and dear to my heart here. So
Yeah.
let's go through this, okay? Mold, by the way, is not insurable. So you don't get actually sued for quote unquote mold. What I got sued for is basically saying we were negligent.
Right.
So,
exactly.
take us through this, because there are residents. So you can see I'm getting fired up. I will let you talk. There are residents that literally go house to house to house and claim mold. And it's kind of like their way of business. Like they literally have a business on this. They're just nefarious folks. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about mold.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I get you, and I feel you. Here in Georgia, we have a law firm that are called the mold attorneys. No lie. And that's what they do. They find people who want to claim mold. So if we go back, we know the first thing about mold is in the
the
TM
mold
industry.
attorneys are for the residents, huh?
Yes, they
Oh,
represent the residents. I know, right? It's like they're like ambulance chasers for mold. It's what makes the lawyers get the jokes, right? It's bad. So yeah, they're called the mold attorney. They are there to help you as a tenant who's been affected by mold. So yeah, obviously as property managers, our first response always has to be, it's not mold, it's mildew, right? That we can't immediately concede that it's mold. But mold is something that we find across the country probably as the number one source of litigation, outside of course of stuff like stealing money, which you're all gonna, no one's gonna do that here. But yes, with mold, it's your reaction that sets the tone, right? Mold claims become bad for property managers when we don't take them seriously and act appropriately. So again, as is the recipe kind of in any ways to avoid liability, have a response mechanism. Tenant complaints, I have mold in the bathroom. This should not wait, right? Send somebody out, right? If they're saying, I have a 2-month-old baby and it's coughing up blood and there's mold, maybe go a little quicker, right? Read the room, right? Know what's happening, right? But get someone out there to take a look, do your own potential either testing or even just remediation, right? You should be able to look and say, okay, what's that? if based upon your own internal criteria, people should be removed from the property, right? Then that is something that you just need to do. I often will hear, oh, my owners are so cheap. They don't want to put them, into a hotel. Why we fix this or whatever. Look, it is far cheaper to put somebody into the Holiday Inn for a few days and to hire a lawyer to have to fight with all of this. Because you're right, not all of this is necessarily covered by insurance. The other times people get sued is not just under a negligence theory, but it'll be breach of contract, right? The tenant will say, you didn't give me the quality of the house you promised me in my lease, right? But yeah, with mold, your reaction is the best determiner. Treat it seriously, listen to them seriously, and assume that it could be, yes, mold that requires remediation and action. Don't, brush it under the rug or take a look and say that's not it.
Here's one of my biggest challenges, right? They claim mold, right? And we, I think as a property manager, the first thing you could do is like let them out of it. Like, hey, you can get out of your lease. We'll give you back a security deposit. We'll even give you some money, right? And of course, they don't want that, right? Say they never take so they don't take that option. So I had one person take the option once. I released the house and I never heard about mold, ever, right? So I feel these people are literally trying to create a once they claim mold, 99% of the time, they're trying to create a case against you so they can sue you. And here's the deal. It's going to cost you $60,000 to $80,000 to fight any kind of claim, especially if you don't have the insurance for it. And your insurance company, when you do have insurance, they know it's going to take 60 to 80 grand to fight this thing. And so what do they want to do? They want to just plead it out. And so these people are looking for quick money grabs, right? So
Good.
Right. So what do I need to do to make sure? So you said, okay, let's act really quick. So do I go send my maintenance guys first, or do I send a mold special? Like, what would you what do you tell your clients? Like, hey, if I'm running a mold, Monica, what do I do? Like,
Sure.
And I know you're not a mold specialist. I get that, but like,
no, I get it. I know when mold became the hot topic many, many years ago, I actually had way too many cases in it for both individuals and property managers. I have about 3 actually going right now. But yeah, send your regular repair people out first. Send your maintenance folks out first. Let them photograph it, bring it back to you, right? You're going to know pretty quickly what you're dealing with. For example, I had a case many years ago where the tenant started complaining of having problems when we came in to look. There had been a huge leak under the washing machine that obviously, we hadn't found, nor was reported. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because the lack of reporting is critical when it comes to defending a mold case. But just what you said is the perfect thing to do. If it looks like this is going to be a serious situation or something that's going to require a lot of displacement, right, for the tenant, absolutely what you just said is best. Offer to terminate the lease right then, give them their security deposit back, pat them on their back, and send them on their way. Some will take that, but then you have others who are going to say, oh no, I want to stay here. That is when one of Monica's #1 rules comes in, which is documentation, right? Dear Miss Tenant, this will confirm that you told me on May 3rd, after I told you you needed to move because of mold, that you wanted to stay in the property with all of your things. Hugs and kisses, property manager, right? Because someone staying once they've complained shifts the legal burden over to them then as to why are you, like think about if it was our family. Why would we choose to stay and put ourselves at harm's risk, right? So that's a huge thing. If somebody wants, somebody won't leave. I have many clients who have early termination clauses that they can invoke as the PM. And with that, many times they will invoke that just to try to even further lessen the amount of exposure these folks have. That is a very big legal defense, though, to say, look, Susie, the tenant, wanted to stay after she was complaining about, coughing and mold. The second thing, which is our big defense, which I have in all the cases that
I have real quick.
Now.
So make sure if you listen to this, that it's not a property manager from their email doing it. Because if that property manager leaves a year or 2 down the road and you have to find that email, do it in a support ticket. So if you have a main support ticket, create everything in one place to easily find it. When I got sued, I got sued 2 years later, and I had to go find stuff and it was impossible. And so
it's a nightmare. Yeah, it's a nightmare. But yeah, that's the best advice you can give. Yeah, do it all within your system that you're using, because then when it happens, you're able to just say to the lawyer, hey, I have everything. Here's where I told her, look, if you stay, that, that's going to be a bad thing. Because remember, with mold, if it truly is mold, right? If it's truly the Stachybotrys, the bad black mold that causes the problems, right? When you do remediation, the spores go all into the air. So that is why, not jokingly, they put the white coverings over everything, and they take things out and wear, protective coverings, because you're breathing it in. So if someone is staying during remediation, they are choosing to expose themselves to a very toxic event. The second best line of defense in a mold case, without question, though, is when did they report it? And I have a case going right now where attached to these people's complaints, right, is a 125-page, I don't even know what we would call it, just like horror show of photos and problems and all this stuff. Guess the first time was when we saw that horror show book at the time of the lawsuit, right? So the old axiom, like for parents, right, is I can't, or even as bosses, I can't fix that which I know is not broken. If I don't know there's mold, I can't fix it. I can't address it. And the courts will see that as an absolute defense to, if you never reported this, how are we supposed to know it's here? So having very good, like you just said, reports of maintenance calls, right, to show specifically what was said and what was done is a lifesaver. It'll win the case in this one situation with this big booklet. It'll win the case because we knew nothing. And when we did find out, we acted, and that makes all the difference.
So main thing is, if somebody says the M word in your business, you change it to mildew, fine. Yeah. But if you have virtual assistants running your maintenance coordination, which many of us do, and somebody puts in that mold word, that should be a trigger, and your policy should say that goes to level 2 and it goes to your property manager. And the property manager who's not handling all these maintenance requests should own that maintenance request. Or maintenance supervisor, whatever your level is, it shouldn't be the one that's handling all the maintenance requests, right? So for example, at Empire, we had 200 plus maintenance requests a month, okay? That my team could not handle the high escalating ones correctly. And this was a mistake that when I look back, I made this mistake. So do as I say, not as I do, if you're listening to this. That should get escalated, and the person handling that should only be handling a handful of escalated work orders. And they're the ones that make sure it gets completely documented.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that again, not only documentation, but escalation, absolutely the way to prevent and limit liability, because the quicker you respond, right, and what your response is, again, like I said, that sets the tone for the whole thing. The other thing we forget sometimes is you've got to let your owners know what are going on, regardless of your management model, whether it's owner, landlord, or PM landlord. You have got to, if in fact you determine it is something that is going to cause potential liability, let your owner know right away. With this one caveat, let them know that have an internal policy as to, do you allow them to then take over the repairs and the maintenance, or do you keep your finger on it? Well, actually, the same case, the case of the big policy manual, right? There, the owner stepped in and did some repairs that we were not aware of. And that, is another complaint these tenants had was, look, this owner didn't do the repairs properly. Now, in most of your PMAs, you probably have limiting language that says if an owner decides to do some maintenance, we're not responsible. Probably upholdable, probably something that the court will permit. But just again, you're the professional in the room, and your reaction makes such a difference. But
I'm not a big fan of the owner taking it over, because when you get sued, it's you, not the owner, or both, and you get put into that suit, and you have no control. So I don't like letting the owners do any. Honestly, I feel like in our society, it is better to try to keep as much control as possible. And then if you have situations too, because we've had that, where an owner refuses to do the right thing. That was one of the other mold cases we had, one with the washing machine. We fired the owner, and we said, look, this is going to lead to bad stuff. We fired that owner. And then the owner got mad later, and he sued us, but we won, showing that what we had done was correct. Yeah, I'd much rather deal with that case than the mold case. So is there some type of insurance that you would recommend that the property management company have to make sure like that this case could be defended by the insurance company. Because the last thing you want out there is I got hit with $1 million lawsuit. I didn't have any insurance. Like it was very stressful.
Scary.
Yeah, it's very scary and stressful. So how do I have that security blanket with when I get this deal, right? I'm going to reach out to you and then we're going to talk. Like, how does that process look like to make sure that the insurance is going to defend?
That's a great question. The first thing you're going to want to do is always start with the owner's insurance, right? And you want to make it clear that, you are bringing this claim pursuant to the property management agreement where the owner says his insurance is going to cover you in the event of this type of lawsuit. Now, your point is correct. There are many insurance policies across the country for homeowners that won't cover mold, but they may cover, how about this? But they may cover internal water intrusion, right? We know that usually nothing but flood insurance protects you from water coming from outside in, but if it's something inside, that may be covered under an internal water leak, such that remember, mold needs water to live, that's food, so that's one way to do it. However, I also recommend folks placing their own errors and omission insurance on notice as well, especially obviously when it goes to a lawsuit, with the stage of a lawsuit, you've got to let your insurance companies know in a timely fashion. You've got to let them know what's going on, because you can't always know for sure whether the owner's policy is going to actually cover you. Some do, some don't. But again, usually our E&O policies, they'll cover negligence, but they're not going to have a specific, this covers negligence due to mold. And then usually what we find is there's also a breach of contract claim. And here's the thing, sometimes breach of contract claims are covered by your insurance where a lawyer is hired, but they don't cover any judgment that comes out of that. So, the problem with our insurance policies in general, and I remember Eric Weatherington did something about insurance a long time ago, but, you really have to just read your policies carefully and kind of like getting to know your constable, get to know your insurance folks, because there are, products out there that might further give you protection, but always try to double stack the owners and then yours as well.
Yeah, I think that I hire an attorney first to make sure that I got all my documentation correct. Then I talk to my insurance broker, if you would, to make sure that he wordsmith it so that we then would send it to the insurance company.
Yes, I do that all the time. Yes, and that is one time when having counsel help you is definitely worthwhile.
It's a few bucks. It's not a lot, right? But then because once the insurance takes it, because the name of the game is to make sure you're defended by the insurance. That's
correct. That's what you want, right? Exactly.
Hire the attorney first to do a little bit of legwork, so that we can make sure that the insurance will defend you. So
that's right.
So if anybody says mold, escalate the work order to your property management team. Hopefully, property managers are not overwhelmed. If your property manager is doing all your maintenance requests, then that should go to you. In theory, because if somebody's handling a bunch of maintenance requests, I promise you things are going to fall through the cracks. So this needs to put a bright light, shine a light on it. Somebody has to take complete ownership, then offer them to get out of the lease, put that in writing. When they say, I don't want that, make sure you put that. If they don't give it to you in writing, make sure you write that in writing, put everything in one ticket. What happens with mold a lot of times is the resident will put in 40 tickets, right? Every day they'll put a ticket in. The best thing to do is just merge all the tickets to one master ticket. So if you can do that, then all of the notes are in one spot. And if you're using something like Property Meld, everything is date stamped and time stamped, every conversation, which is going to be important. Then send somebody out there to assess it. So this is one thing I did not do. I learned from you just today, Monica, is that go in and take the photos first and reevaluate the photos, or you go yourself to see what's going on. What I did is I would just send my maintenance team out there to handle the mildew. And that was a mistake, especially if there was multiple leaks and people kept complaining. And then if you do get served, hire somebody like Monica and get with your insurance broker to review everything and make sure that you wordsmith it correctly so that the insurance will defend you. And prior to all of this, before a claim comes in, review your policies to make sure that you will be defended. One of the things that we had trouble with, Monica, maybe you can help us with this, is my owner would actually become adversarial. And so in 2 of the 3 cases, my owner was adversarial because he didn't want to call his insurance to deal with it. He didn't want anything to deal with this. And he basically like threw us and then ended up suing Empire on top of it. So now I'm getting sued by both individuals. What are some of the best ways to smooth it over? Because I think a united front, owner plus property manager, will have a much better success rate in defending. So
that's a great point. I will tell you that in probably 95% of the cases, though, I recommend owner do have separate counsel for property manager, not just because owner may get hostile to property manager, but because property manager may need to remind owner, look, you promised to indemnify me, right? What I normally do is if it comes in through my property manager, I take an assessment. I usually have an initial phone call to see, is it possible for us to all stay together? Sometimes it can be, but there are times when it just can't be. What I tend to do then is get that owner over to one of my friendly colleagues, right? Somebody who I've worked with I practiced for 30 years, get somebody who I've known for 29 years, so I can say, Jim, I'd like you to come into this case knowing that Jim is going to talk turkey with me before he says, Monica, we want to see the pants off a property manager, right? So you want to be sure that your attorney understands that there could be, differing interest from that regard. But you are correct. You always want to, from the very beginning, be a united front as much as you possibly can. In fact, that's the example of that other lawsuit with the washing machine, where when it was becoming apparent that we weren't, we said, well, we're out. You deal with this mold situation, which ultimately protected ourselves. But if you're all named in the suit together, yes, be kumbaya, try to be together as much as possible.
Right. Well,
still in the back of your head, but still have that little bird on your shoulder saying, but we got to be careful in case we got to go this. We have to cross. It's called a cross claim, where you would cross sue or cross claim against your co-defendant. So, but yes, always trying to be the united front, and also information sharing. That's why I recommend at the beginning of this, bring them into the loop, right? If it looks like it's something that's escalating. And I love your idea of putting all your notes into the one system. You cannot document these situations enough, because when you're taking notes, they're contemporaneous, right? I can't remember what I did yesterday. So how am I going to remember this really important thing, right? Yeah. So the more you document, the easier it is to defend these cases and win.
So we're up against it, but I can talk to you all day, but I want to get this. I got to ask you this here. So indemnification, right? It's like everybody says, oh, well, I have this indemnification clause in my property management agreement. And so like they take this laissez-faire attitude, like it's not really bothering me. But if you get sued for, like for breach of contract, or you get sued for, not doing your job, so to speak, and the words escape me right now, like that doesn't indemnify you.
Right. 100%.
And a decent, any attorney worth their weight in salt is going to sue the management company on breach of contract or things that are not indemnifiable, so to speak.
Exactly. Absolutely. Like that's, and yes, you're exactly right, is that there's going to be many times where, we think this concept of, oh, we can indemnify, we're going to be indemnified. That's like our hall pass, but that's not necessarily true. That goes back to what you just said a minute ago as to, are we friendly? Are we together? Or is that owner going to be like, what were you doing, Pete? Where have you been? Why did you not respond? So yeah, you have to really be very critical of realizing that you can't just sleep in a warm blanket every night with indemnity. Indemnity is sort of what you make of it, right? Indemnity could be really great, but it could be not at all if you haven't done what you're supposed to do. Great point.
Right. Indemnity is you basically are begging the owner to do something and he won't give you the money, and you're too scared as a property manager to spend his money because he may not pay you back. Right. And so that's where that's where you fire somebody, and then they have the indemnification clause, and then you say, hey, Mr. Tenant, let me help you. Right.
Well, that's what happened in the washing machine case. Exactly. Yeah. Tenant reached out, and we were very careful how we answered, but it was clear that the responsibility by us firing that owner, the owner was now in charge. And then the owner refused to do certain things and got into all sorts of trouble, tried to come back onto us later. And, one of the things in that case, one of the defenses was they kept saying, well, your website says you're going to come in and inspect, the properties. And the judge basically looked at this lawyer and said, sir, is the website attached to the contract? Like what do you, don't look to that website. And it was just a good example again of not being afraid to make a decision, because ultimately all those decisions were correct, by doing what you know is best as the PM. That's what got my PM in that case. Actually, we won attorney's fees in his favor in that case against the owner.
Monica, I'll have to get you back on because we're up against it. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to do the lightning round. But maybe I'll have you back on and we literally just decipher a case and go over step by step.
I love that. Yes, we sure could do that.
We can get really into the nuts and bolts. Half the listeners would fall asleep and get into a car accident, and the other half would be riveted and be, in a.
I love it. Absolutely. Anything you need. I love it. Yeah.
All right. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back after this. And then we'll be the lightning round. All right. Take a quick break. All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to put Monica Gilroy in the lightning round. Monica, are you ready for the lightning round?
I hope so.
All right. So let's go. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes.
I liked you for a little bit. What was your first job?
Selling shoes.
Really? Okay.
Yes. How much of an answer do you need in the lightning round?
That's good. No, that's good. If you want to expand, you can. You don't have to, though.
Okay.
What is one piece of advice you'd give someone just starting out in business?
Oh, don't do it. Don't do that.
What is your ideal vacation?
Oh, Hawaii. Beach, books, cocktails, laying there doing nothing.
What is something that most people don't know about you?
Oh, gosh. My dad is a scientist. He is a paper scientist, and he is in the International Paper Hall of Fame.
That is awesome.
There is such a thing in Appleton, Wisconsin.
All right. If you could have dinner with anyone alive, who would it be?
Anyone alive? Anyone alive? Hillary Clinton. Sorry, everybody. Just an interesting life, interesting person.
You ask her where all the bodies are buried. Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah. Which Disney character do you most associate with?
Mickey Mouse. I'm the boss. I'm the lead.
What's the biggest challenge you're currently facing in your business?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. My biggest challenge is I'm at a point, what to do at this point in my life, because I've got two seniors, rising high school, rising college seniors, and I'm trying to look at these next 10 years where I've got to maximize my profit to get these kids finished with school into their early lives. And then what's that going to look like for me in that next time? So I'm really doing some soul searching and realizing that I need to do what I love to do. And that's things like this, working with clients I love, but really trying to keep an eye on that balance of what it's going to look like in this next decade for me.
All right, last question. Which you prefer, dogs or cats?
Dogs, even though I have two stinky cats. Sorry, cats. Little white, small, fluffy dogs. That's what I threaten to get when the kids go off to school, is a small, white, fluffy dogs.
Monica, if somebody is compelled to reach out to you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is just through my email, which is my name, monica.gilroy@gilroyfirm.com. Email is always best. Be sure to note in the tagline that you're a NARPM member, that you heard the podcast, and happy to help or get you to one of my team members to help. Again, our practice is national, and we can help in many ways, and are always here for NARPM. We just love everything that it does, and just always thank them so much. And you too, Pete, for the opportunities it gives me and my firm.
And Gilroy is one L, right? G-I-L-R-O-Y.
Yep. Like Gilroy, California, if you're from there. I don't know.
I didn't know you guys were national. That's
yes.
good to know.
I am very lucky to have, throughout my career, had a number of national clients that have allowed me to create a network of attorneys. And because of that, I've appeared in courts all over the United States. And with fair housing, that can be answered out of anywhere. As long as you know what you're doing, you can answer it. And we've been doing it for many years. Used to serve as fair lending counsel for SunTrust across the whole nation. So I've enjoyed that national practice for a long time.
And if you want to take the fair housing course that VPM has, or you want to learn more about virtual assistants, go to vpmsolutions.com. You can create a free account on VPM and you can take that course. There's no fee for the course. And anybody in your organization can also take that course. There's no fee for that course. We also have about 12 property management 101 courses. And if you want to reach out to me, best way is email. You can tell that Monica and I are around the same age because we do email and not TikTok. It's at vpmsolutions.com. And if you're listening to this and you're not a NARPM member, why not join? Go to NARPM, NARPM.org, or call the good folks over there at 800-782-3452. Monica, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pete. It was great.